right. Okay, so today's lecture is on the evolution of the presidency. Class, have we seen the power of the president go up or down in American history? It's gone up. Okay. I've done a little bit of this lecture already, so you'll hear some of the same questions again. For instance, if you look at the wall class of the first 26 presidents, how many of them are actually pretty memorable? Only like how many? Look at the orange wall class. Look at the back of the room. That's right. If you look at Washington, sure, memorable. Jefferson, I guess so. Jackson, yeah. But now we're all the way to Lincoln, number 16. Then all the way to like Teddy, number 26. That's like only 4 or 5 big personalities, strong leaders of the first 26 presidents. And the point is, when the presidency started, all those many years ago, they didn't have a ton of power. It's only over time that power has expanded. Okay? I'm kind of sad. I got to click through some of this quickly. This is presidential code names for Secret Service. I'm not going to read them to you, but you can read them. Boop. Okay. Class, you do not need to write this down. Just listen. Okay? Americans want a president who is powerful and who can do good things, like Washington and Jefferson and Lincoln and Roosevelt and Kennedy, and yet they're scared of a president who's too powerful, who would abuse their rights. All right? Class, you are going to write this down. Period 1, you've already written this. But class, who is listening on this YouTube video, you need to write this stuff down. All right. When they're at the Constitutional Convention and they're forming America's government, they were thinking about how to set up the executive branch, and some people wanted to have multiple presidents. Period 1, give me thumbs up or thumbs down for multiple presidents. Would you like to have multiple presidents? Do you like Mr. Robinson? No, you don't. You want a domestic president and a foreign policy president? That sounds like not a little bit better, but still not great. Okay. Well, we didn't decide to do that. Some people wanted a council that would be able to veto presidential action. But we kind of ended up with something like that with the Senate, sort of, because they can veto like treaties, or they need to approve treaties, approve judges, approve cabinet members. Some wanted the president to have a lifelong term. Can you imagine? We did not do that. And eventually they decided on a single elected president with a fixed term of office. I'm going to go quick right now because my students in period 1 have already written this stuff, but substitute teacher, you should pause the video so that kids can write the notes. Okay. There's Hamilton, by the way, the guy that thought presidents should have a life term. He was never president. He's on the $10 bill. He was our first Secretary of the Treasury. Yeah, we can write this. There was a fear of having an excessively strong president, and there was a fear that the president would be a fetus of monarchy. Ooh, should I do it? Should I draw it? A fetus of monarchy. What's a fetus, class? A baby still in the womb, like a little baby king. So on your paper, class, why don't you draw a little baby fetus with a crown on its head? There was concern that there was no term limits for the president, and they could just run forever. But we finally did change that. After what president, class? After FDR, he was president until about 1945 when he died, and about 5 years later. It takes a long time to pass an amendment. We passed an amendment over term limits. All right, how many years can you serve as president, class? 10. 10 years. We were also feared, you don't need to write this, we feared an excessively weak president who would become a tool of the Senate. And so we had to strike this balance. If you make him too weak, the legislature will usurp his powers. If you make him too strong, he will usurp the legislature's powers. Okay, you don't need to write this. Yes, you do need to write this. And period 1, I know this is kind of where we ended the other day, so check and make sure that your notes contain everything that's up there. I'm going to talk about each one. And I might do it quickly because with period 1 we've already done this, but pause the video and take your time if you're watching this on YouTube. Some people, this is all about the election of the president. Some people wanted to have Congress elect the president, and if you've heard me in class before, I mentioned that I actually think this is not a bad idea. This is how most modern democracies elect their president. They have the Congress do it, or they call it the Parliament, and they pick not the president. They often call it the Prime Minister, but they're selected by Congress. And why does Mr. Robinson like this? Because automatically there's like party unification, like the party in power pick the president, and so you don't have divided government. I don't like divided government that much. Some people thought we should directly elect the president. Class period 1, do we directly elect the president today in America? No. Who elects the president? It's a weird thing called the Electoral College. States are worth points. How many points does it take to become president? 270, that's right. So let's focus on why did we not choose a direct election. I think our founding fathers thought the large states would have too much power. They didn't trust the average person. They thought we were stupid and illiterate, and back then they were pretty right, and maybe today they're right. And communication was poor, like there was no internet. A letter would take months to be mailed somewhere. And then look at letter B. Our founding fathers worried that if the average person voted directly for president, they could be tricked into voting for a demagogue. A demagogue is someone who uses fear and hatred and racism and blame to scare people into voting for them. Luckily, that's not a problem in modern America. That never happens. Okay. Little wink wink joke. I went through that fast. You're going to want to pause the video. Now, students in class will actually be writing, so the time that I'm clicking will probably match better. Okay, so the compromise. We're going to have the Electoral College. And as a result of the Electoral College, the average American will have some input. Like lots of input. In fact, most of the time, the person that got the most votes wins. And then large states will have a good amount of influence, but small states will be overpowered too, so that they mattered. They're protected by having a minimum of 3 electoral votes. I think there was a test question we had somewhere that shows that a person in Wyoming, their voting power for the presidency is something like, I forget, 7 times more powerful than a Californian's vote for president. So small states are overpowered. Please reduce. Don't write everything. Let's see here. Yeah, I don't even want to deal with that last bullet. The last bullet mentions if nobody gets 270, it goes to the House of Reps. You remember that? Maybe we could just write that instead of all those words. If nobody gets 270, the House of Reps decides the president. Except they vote in a very strange way. Do you remember how they vote? Who would definitely be president based on the way the House votes? Republican or Democrat?
Republican.
Yeah, because every state, like California, we got 53 people in the House of Reps, but we would be worth 1 point, 1 vote. You understand? And so just do the math. Is there more red or blue states? There's way more red states, and so it would definitely go to a Republican. But if nobody gets 270, it goes to the House of Reps. We have had that happen in American history, I think. I'm not an APUSH teacher, but if you're an APUSH, I think you learned about that. Is that like the Jefferson times? I don't know. Wasn't there something? Nobody knows? Where are my APUSH kids at? Elections that went to the House of Reps through many rounds of voting. It was, I want to say in the first 6 elections that happened. A bit. Alright. Boop. Okay. Let's see. I think we can just listen to this, and especially after I talked to you guys about this. Class, why do I respect Washington? Because he left after 2 terms, and he didn't make himself like a king. And so there was this fear of a president who would try to just keep running for election forever. But when Washington stepped away, it was very calming for our democracy. Like, okay, this is like the new sort of tradition. They might serve 2 times and then they'll walk away. I don't think it was this class that I said yesterday. I don't know, maybe it was. Nobody in the world had ever held a position of power like that and just chosen to voluntarily walk away. So, good on you, George Washington. Okay, this is where things get dicey As in, I don't want you to write all this. Let's see. Yeah, this class is not a history class, and I don't really want to do all this. But I do want you to get a general vibe, okay? And I've talked about our early presidents, that they were more like, they waited for bills to come to their desk, and they signed them, but they weren't looking for ways to like flex their muscle and use their power. Remember, they saw government as like scary things, so they were passive. Class, we're not going to write all this. Perhaps write, I mean, I've said it out loud, but I don't think we wrote it down. The first, how about, of the first 26 presidents, only 4 or 5 were super strong presidents. You can write that. That's how we're going to summarize these slides. Of the first 26 presidents, only 4 or 5 were very strong presidents. And then let's look at the circumstances that made them strong. I want to say there's about 2 possibilities for what made them strong. Can anybody guess what circumstances might make a president have to be strong? War, okay? So write down like a little dash. What makes some of these guys strong is war and crisis. War and crisis. Or there's one guy that's not really, like Andrew Jackson, he's the one. He didn't really have war, but he was strong. So anybody know, how would we describe, why was he strong? The answer I'm looking for is just, some people just have personalities, and he was just going to be strong no matter what. You ever run into somebody in your life who's just like, that person's like crazy? Like, I think Trump is like that. Like, if he was president 200 years ago, he would insist on being strong, and if he was president today, he would insist on being strong. Does Trump project strength more than Biden did? Yes, I think we can all agree that. So just, you put some people in the presidency, and they're just going to like use all the power available. You know what I mean? And Biden was not one of those people. So the point is, of our first presidents, you could have been strong because there was crisis, or you could have been strong because you just had a certain personality. You see Andrew Jackson up here. I don't know that it's worth writing, but he definitely did expand the presidential power. Here's one thing. When power expands, it becomes like the new normal, sort of. So like Biden pardoned his whole family when he left office the other day. What do I anticipate Trump is going to do in 4 years? Pardon his whole family. So as new presidential norms happen, they've just become common behavior. We don't need to write it, but Andrew Jackson used the spoil system. He hired all his buddies for government jobs. That's the A-push thing, but back then, anyone who helped you get elected, you'd like give them a good job to come work in Washington, D.C. We don't really do that so much anymore. We make people pass a test and show that they're qualified. So this is called the spoil system or the patronage system, and we got rid of that. He vetoed a lot of laws, more than anybody ever had before. And he straight up, I don't even understand this one, he ignored the Supreme Court. He wanted to move the Native Americans, the Trail of Tears, you've heard of that before? He wanted to make them like leave this area, was it Georgia or Florida, to leave this area? And the Supreme Court told him no, he can't do that, and he just did it anyway. I always find that shocking. That's impeachable. That's impeachable behavior, but they did not impeach him. Brain snack? Let me see what the brain snack is. Ooh. Sure, it's fun. Okay. Turn to your neighbor and discuss. These are random associations that don't necessarily make sense, but then you make them make sense, okay? How is the president like the Milky Way galaxy? Turn to your shoulder partner and discuss.
Hello. I've been guide on this trip panelist, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah, now my job's done.
What do you need your help? Amelia Perez, what is that? I
don't know. It's weird. It's weird.
Well, they got the most Oscar nominations.
I do not agree, but you know what I'm saying.
I didn't watch it, but I don't agree.
Yeah.
I've seen enough clips to feel like it's not I'm like being recorded right now. It's not a serious movie, I feel like. Anyway, I can't talk. I forgot.
What are we doing right now?
We're halfway through the notes.
Okay.
All right, I hear some great answers, but we're gonna move on. Okay. Again, we're not writing this slide because this is a time period where like sometimes presidents were strong, but mostly they were weak. Lincoln had to be strong because he had the country to hold together with the Civil War. All right, and then just more of a period of presidents not being strong. All right, here we go. Now we start to get to some strong presidents. This is Teddy. Okay, Woodrow Wilson. So the modern presidency, like how we view a president today, was kind of born with FDR. Okay, so now we're going to start taking more detailed notes, I think, because I've been skipping a lot of slides, but no longer. So the modern presidency of like what we expect a president to do today was kind of built with FDR. Now, he was incredibly powerful, won election 4 times. What were the circumstances that made him so powerful? The Great Depression and World War II. Okay? I want to emphasize something to you. If you were born in America 200 years ago, you mostly did not interact with the federal government. Like, they did not have an impact on your life outside of like the post office and a war, if we had a war. But the Great Depression changes things. And I think we should write that down. The Great Depression made the average American look to the federal government to solve their problems. That's a lot of words I just said. The Great Depression made the average American look to the federal government to solve a lot of their problems. Because people were starving, people were unemployed, and FDR stepped up. And I hope you had a U.S. history class where you learned about all the different stuff that FDR passed, like the AAA and the CCC, and like he passed, this is a big one, just this one thing alone, he passed Social Security, which said when you're old, you don't have to work anymore. The government will pay you to stay home. And that freed up a bunch of jobs for young people who were looking for work. And it means that like today, you can count on the idea that like when I'm 70, I don't have to work anymore. The government will give me, you know, a couple grand a month, enough that if my house is paid off, I'm not going to starve to death. I mean, you're young. We'll see where things are at in 50 years. Maybe you'll have to work longer. But that's just one thing that he did. The federal government went from like, oh, we just deliver your mail and we just have an army, to like now we do all kinds of things. We're going to today, we're going to be providing some healthcare, education, all kinds of stuff. So huge change with FDR that would last forever, and each president after would still be powerful. This is Truman. And I think what we're looking for is every time we have a crisis, presidential power has expanded. So Great Depression, World War II, yeah? Chronologically speaking, what are some other crises since then that have made the president more powerful? The Cold War, absolutely good. The Cold War, yes. And all the nuclear weapons. Who decides to launch a nuke? It's not Congress, it's the president. Which is weird because only Congress can declare war, but only the president can launch a nuke. What's another thing that happened? You were unborn, but I was your age. Well, sort of, but then I was going for 9/11. 9/11 has greatly increased the president's power. And then when we have financial crises, COVID or the 2008 housing crash, all these things increase presidential power kind of forever. Like we gave the president a bunch of power with 9/11, and he still has that power today, even though it's been 24 years since 9/11, which just sounds insane to say out loud. Make sure on your paper you have that Cold War increased the power of the president. And the other things that I've said, can you write them down too? 9/11 or COVID. Just as this is just like history stuff. JFK, LBJ, Nixon were powerful presidents. Poor Jimmy Carter was not really. But then Reagan became president. He was powerful. Bush was president. He was powerful. Basically, all of our modern, you look at the wall, they're all quite powerful. Even if you think Biden is weaker than Trump, Biden's still way more powerful than our, many of our first 26 presidents, like by far. Make sure you write down 9/11. Write down the Patriot Act too. And connected to 9/11. It was passed after 9/11. You remember that bill that we dealt with in the committee where they could spy on your communications and try to catch terrorists? That's basically what the Patriot Act did. But we didn't know that they were doing that. There was a guy that worked for the government, you might have heard of him, Edward Snowden. And he told America, you know, they're like listening to all your phone calls and reading all your text messages. And that's how we try to catch terrorists before they happen. I want to add one more thing to the notes, and perhaps it's like the most important thing. So, oh man, sometimes a visual is good. So let me erase this. It's actually kind of connected to what I'm erasing. And hopefully the web camera can see it. Kinda. Let's see. Okay. So, I'm trying to think of how I want this to look. When we look at the Constitution, here's a little Constitution. When we look at the Constitution, it says that like a lot of America's problems should not actually be solved by the president. They should be solved by who? Congress. Okay. So the problems, and I want you, anything I put on the board, I want you to like fit it on your paper. And it's probably good to keep it on one page, so just, you could do a little tiny drawing. Congress should solve our problems. Then, like the whole necessary and proper clause and the elastic clause saying Congress has the right to do what's necessary and proper for the good of the American people. Okay, cool. So Congress should solve our problems. Here's what we've seen Congress do over the years, and it's a big part of why presidential power, of why presidential power has increased, is that we will recognize a problem like our students are not being educated well enough, okay? So here's a problem. Education. I particularly think about in the 1950s, we felt as a nation like pretty stupid that like the Soviets were like building rockets and we needed to like catch up with them. So we overhauled our education. We were like, we gotta like fix our education. Does anybody have a guess as to what Congress does to fix our education system? Or like one of the things they do? Yeah.
No Child Left Behind?
That's like when I was a teenager, so you're too modern. What was created from the federal government to deal with education? I'll give you a hint. When the country started, there was only 3 federal cabinet departments. There was like Treasury, Defense, and I can't remember the other one. State, okay? Treasury, Defense, and State. There's only 3. Today there's 15. So what was created to deal with education? Okay, good. So check it out. This is kind of the whole point of this conversation. What Congress does when there's a problem and they're like, I've got an idea. Let's let the president deal with it. We'll create this thing and give it to the president. So they create Department of Education. And you're right about No Child Left Behind. It comes from this department. You're just like 50 years ahead of where I wanted you to be. And guys, this is the key. By creating the Department of Education, who have they made more powerful? The president. To be clear, like this is part of the executive branch, and the pres is now more powerful. So we go back to the founding of the country. There was only 3 of these departments. Today, there's 15. Okay? And think about all kinds of different conversations. Oh, our water's not clean. We passed a law called the Clean Water Act, and the Environmental Protection Agency is making the executive branch bigger. Farmers are being abused or they're not getting paid enough for their crops. We'll make the Department of Agriculture. Just like healthcare is a mess. We'll create the Department of Health. Every time they do this, they're increasing presidential power because it's like Thanos and he's getting more stones in his infinity gauntlet or wherever the heck it is, okay? So do you understand how over time it makes sense that the first presidents were not so strong, and it makes sense that today's presidents are the strongest that there ever could be, right? Thumbs up if you're like, the logic makes perfect sense. And you can blame, who can you blame for the increase of presidential power? You can blame Congress, because they just are like, they write, this is a test question here, so go ahead and do a little dash by Congress. They write broadly worded laws, and they let the president figure it out. They write broadly worded laws, and they let the president just figure it out. They could step up. They could limit presidential power. They could make things more specific. But instead, they're just like, hey, president, do what you can to deal with terrorism. And he's like, all right, I'll read everyone's text messages, and I'll scan everyone's phone calls. So they could be more specific and more involved and reduce presidential power, but they don't. And as a result, over time, we've seen the president become the most powerful human being in the world. And our notes are done. I don't think we need to do a summary, and I'm going to stop this recording. Bye-bye.